Alright, what I'm doing now is I'm going through, since the top's done, I'm going through all this birch wood. I've got a whole stack of it over here, and I think I've got some picked out on the sawhorses where I'm going to start on the base with the 4 legs. I done cut one piece. This is birch from my grandpa years and years ago. It come out of, he actually cut this on a sawmill for his cabinets back then, and is what I've been told by my dad. It come out of my dad's attic that my grandpa stored it in, which was his house back then. So all this birch here come from that. So it's kind of got sentimental value. So that's why we want to incorporate this into the table. So what I'm doing now is I'm cutting. I got these here 4 stacks, and the other part over there. I'm cutting them to 31 inches. I'm looking them over good and checking them out, make sure I pick out the best. And what I'm doing, the reason I'm doing that is I got to cut them to size, which is right now a couple inches over the finished length, and because I got to get them planed and edged and all that. So right now what I'm doing is cutting them to a rough size, picking out the best, and I'll do that for all 4 stacks. So I'll have 4 separate stacks for 4 different legs. What I'm going to do is glue these all together, and hopefully when I'm done, I'm real close to 4 by 4 inches to hold up that hickory table. You're probably asking, well, why would you use 2 different woods? This has got a lot of sentimental value to me, and it'll be just fine. It'll do just fine. And on top of all that, it doesn't matter what kind of wood it is specifically per se, and the reason that is because we're going to what they call chalk paint this. So when we're done, it really doesn't matter what kind of wood it really is, because you're not going to see it like you do the top. So it's got sentimental values, the main thing, and Dad was kind of wanting it out of his attic because of all the weight that was up there. Of course, it was probably up there, don't tell how many years, but you know, as time goes on, you know certain things ain't going to get done. So I'm going to put it to good use, the wife and I, and that's what I'm doing right now, and we'll report back when we change something different. the fan on. It's already starting to get humid. But we just run these all through the table saw and get one edge. Some of them was already pretty close to size. As you can see, we just barely scathed some of them. But most of them needed ripped off. So this is just another step closer to getting them down to size and getting all of them jointed and planed. Hello, this is Jeff with Hodgepodge Hoosiers. This is another part of building the base on the dining table that we're building. I've already done some and I've already started. First of all, I want to comment, this is I found it used. It's not new, I found it used and it was pretty rusty, and we cleaned it all up and I waxed it good. And so far it seems to be doing okay. The knives does have a small little nick in them, but it won't hurt nothing for what I'm doing here. So definitely a set of knives is on the agenda in the short term for this.
It's a joiner, right?
This is a joiner. Yes, this is a Delta joiner. It's probably one of the smallest, if not the smallest, that they make. I don't know everything about all these tools, but I do know this is probably one of the shortest ones that they make. You're supposed to use these. These are so small that I'm not saying I can't use them, but I feel like it's more dangerous for me to use them on these short pieces than it would be if I didn't use them. So I want to make this clear. This is not a how-to video. This is me doing a dining table for myself and my wife. So what we're doing here, a joiner, this is a rough sawed piece of birch. My grandpa actually cut it on a sawmill a long time ago, and it's been sitting in the attic of a house ever since. Actually, all of this right here is that. What we're doing is if you want to be able to run this, you can't just up and run it through a planer because it won't be totally flat. What you got to do, you got to have a joiner. You got to run one side through a joiner, and then that side is flat. And then you'll run one edge through the joiner, and then these two sides will be flat. They'll be 90 degrees. Then you can run it through a planer, because the bed on the planer will hold it will set flat and it won't be bowed and all that. That's what you're doing with this, is you're getting out the bow, and not only the bow but all the saw marks as well on a joiner. It's kind of loud, and yes, I should be wearing hearing protection. This is not a how-to video. I will make sure and express that. Make sure you wear hearing protection. Anytime you're running any of these machines here, table saw, joiner, or planer. What we're doing now is getting one side planed and one edge planed. That's all we're doing right now. And then after that, you can see here, I'm putting X's on the sides that's planed and joined. And of course you can see it by your naked eye, but after you plane this side, then if you're not careful, you'll get confused which side is which. This way you will keep it straight on which side is planed and which side was joined. I like doing that. You don't really have to do that, but I like doing that on account of when I run this through the planer. As you can see, I've got different thicknesses here, so I don't want to get confused with all these boards. I want to know which side of each board was jointed and planed, because I know I've done set this up to 90 degrees, and we all know a planer, if it's accurate, which that one's brand new, so it should. I've actually had it for a while. I just haven't used it yet. But anyway, we'll get started on this. Like I said, I've already done a couple just to get the feel of this and make sure everything felt right with it. It runs smooth. Again, you should be using hearing protection on this too. I do have our door open so the sound isn't so bad in the garage itself. With the door open, the sound it's still too loud. You still should be wearing hearing protection, but it's not near as bad with the big door open. So anyway, we'll get started here. keep in mind, we're going to be gluing and clamping all these together separately. There'll be 4 legs, so that's what we're doing here. We're getting all these flat on one side, and then we'll run them through the planer, and then we'll glue them together, and then we'll, after we glue them all together, then we'll join them all 2 sides again, and then we'll come back. If I got too much to take off, run them through the table saw, and if I've got just about right, I'll run them through the planer to make square, perfect legs. That's the whole point of this is the whole point of the joiner, is to start out with something flat and square. Yeah, I'm planing these boards down. A lot of them look all like this, of course, and a lot of them is cleaned up, but there's a lot of them that's, you know, that's I got to go way down yet. So what's happening right now, honestly, is I'm overloading my cord. I got a heavy duty cord, but it's still getting a little too warm than I care about. I've got one of them automatic deals where when I flip this on, that pulls up, it goes up and runs. So both of them running at the same time on one circuit. So what's going on. So what I might have to do is plug this in separately somewhere, and then just have to kick that on manually. I can try that and see if that helps. Anyway, this video isn't about that. The video is actually about these. I've got everything in pretty good shape. Like I said, they're not all cleaned up yet, and they have to be, ones like this definitely has to be planed down farther. That's just too much. There'll be big gaps in the legs, and we don't want that. So I'm down to an inch now in thickness on all these boards, and this is still what we have. The way it's looking right now, I'm going to shoot for another 1/16 on each board, so 15/16, so each board is going to be a 1/16 less. So the leg is going to be that much smaller is my whole point of that. And so with that being said, at an inch, and if I end up going down to a 1/16 on each board, that's a 1/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna end up finishing the legs out at 3 3/4 if I go down that far, if I have to go that far, which it looks like I do, because there is several boards in there in each of these stacks about that bad. My point with all that is I can only take about a 32nd at a time with this DeWalt. It won't, if you go any more than that, it gets overloaded. So definitely not going to show you, bore you to death with running these through the planer that many more times, because you're probably talking 2 more times per board at least. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. That's what we're doing right now at this time. As always, if you ever have any questions, just leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer. And I believe that's all I got right now. All right, this phase is done. They're all cleaned up. What I did was there was actually 4. So I planed 4 a little thinner and left the other ones thick. So
These top 4.
Yeah, so I could keep my my thickness closer to my thickness. So this phase is done. It's time to glue together, and then we'll return.